They're trying to make sure Durk gotta die for the streets. That's what it's looking like. He's gonna have to take the life imprisonment for all the rats he used to rock with to walk out of jail. And I got no place calling these guys rats because they were the killers. But this is how things are now. The guys who pull the triggers are the first to tell. It is what it is.
Lil Durk fainted in court after learning that the walls were closing in on him. Days before his trial is set to begin, several major rulings came down that the defense could not stop, and some of the evidence they fought hardest to keep away from the jury is now expected to be part of the government's case. The trial date is locked in, the courtroom is getting ready, and the pressure is building fast.
Well, police arrested Grammy Award-winning rapper Lil Durk in Florida on federal charges that he paid for the attempted 2022 revenge killing of another rapper at a Los Angeles gas station. Investigators are saying the shooting was aimed at Quando Rondo. Rondo's cousin was killed instead.
Once you see what happened during those final pre-trial hearings, you will understand why this case has become such a serious turning point for Durk. Stay with us because there is a lot more underneath the headlines. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story surrounding Lil Durk's federal murder-for-hire case, the pre-trial decisions that went against his defense, what prosecutors are seeking to present in court, and what could be at stake when jury selection begins on August 20th. Let's get into it.
He'll still be alive right now, the nigga a gassy bug. He'll still be alive right now, the nigga a gassy bug. Damn, Durk, this you? Leave, Smirk. What's going on in there? You might be the original blessed throat, by the way. I just peeped that, like, it's just all in my face, like, what's going on with that? But shout out Durk, man, he been holding it down. That boy done had to shave his head off so he got to get into a fight. You know what I'm saying? They pulling on his hair and stuff. Just don't get cut in the back or slapped in the back of the head. You know what I'm saying? That's... It's looking grim for Durk. It's looking like he might not get out anytime soon because we got people like this on the police camera outright snitching before they even walk into the establishment. This man's crying his eyes out. They didn't even tell him anything yet. This man probably got pulled over. They ain't even tell him nothing. He's already crying. I'll tell y'all about a murder. I'll tell y'all about it. Stop it, buddy. And I know oh my gosh, Durk is looking cooked. You got people like this. And one more of these people, it's over. You might just need him. He telling everything. Free Schmurgio, though.
Before we break down those latest rulings, let's keep it real about who we are talking about. Durk Banks, known worldwide as Lil Durk, is one of the biggest Chicago rappers of his generation. He built Only the Family, better known as OTF, into a major music collective and turned his experiences growing up on Chicago's South Side into a career that eventually reached the top of hip-hop. Durk began releasing music in the early 2000s when streaming was still growing, and he built his name through mixtapes, features, relentless work, and a reputation that connected with listeners. Over time, those street-focused stories became mainstream records. He earned Grammy recognition alongside Lil Baby for Voice of the Heroes, worked with artists including Drake and Future, and became one of the defining voices of his generation. His sound, cadence, subject matter, and connections helped shape an entire lane in hip-hop.
So the fans alleged that a Quando Rondo affiliate reached out to Lil Durk to squash the beef, and Durk replied with, am I reading this correctly? Take a piece of the switch? Now, Lil Durk is fighting this case right now, and it's getting ready to come up like in probably like 2 weeks. So this coming out right before the case is upon us is crazy. Y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section. Does this change what y'all think about Lil Durk? Do y'all think Lil Durk is coming home?
He is not some unknown name sitting on the sidelines. He is a major figure in the culture. That is exactly why his federal case has attracted so much attention. When an artist at Durk's level faces federal murder-for-hire charges, the music industry pays attention, and the case has remained under a microscope since his October 2024 arrest. At the center of the government's allegations is a relationship, a violent tragedy, and the death of King Von, born Davon Bennett. Von was one of Durk's closest collaborators, a rising Chicago rapper known for his sharp storytelling and growing momentum through songs like Crazy Story and Took Her to the O.
Look what he said. Durk said, I'm not celebrating New Year's because my dog is dead and nobody's doing nothing. Quando out here acting like he don't got nothing to worry about when we got his location.
Then on November 6, 2020, everything changed. Outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta during the early morning hours, a confrontation erupted between King Von's group and the crew of Savannah rapper Quando Rondo, born Tykeon Bowman. What started as a physical confrontation reportedly turned into gunfire, and King Von was struck multiple times. He died that morning at just 26 years old. Timothy Leaks, a Quando Rondo associate, was charged with murder in connection with Von's death, but those felony charges were later dropped. For Durk and OTF, the loss was massive. King Von was not simply a business partner. He was family, a member of the collective Durk had helped build, and an artist whose career Durk had personally supported. The grief that followed Von's death was public, emotional, and widely documented, but according to federal prosecutors, that grief eventually became something far more serious. The government alleges it developed into a criminal conspiracy that crossed state lines and ended with another man's death. And this is where the case takes a much darker turn. Prosecutors allege that during the nearly 2 years following King Von's death, Durk made it known that he would pay anyone who killed Quando Rondo, whom prosecutors say Durk blamed for Bennett's death. According to court filings, the government claims that alleged bounty reached as high as $1 million. Prosecutors also point to communications they say contain coded language between Durk and people around him. They argue that certain messages suggested anyone who successfully reached the target would receive a reward, and they plan to present that language to the jury as evidence of alleged hitman payments. According to an FBI affidavit from agent Sarah Corcoran, the alleged operation moved quickly after Durk's associates learned that Quando Rondo was in Los Angeles in August 2022. On August 18, 2022, investigators say the group identified Rondo's location. Then, on August 19, a group prosecutors allegedly connected to OTF followed Rondo to a gas station in Los Angeles' Beverly Grove neighborhood, near the Beverly Center. At least 18 rounds were allegedly fired toward the vehicle. Quando Rondo survived the attack, but his 24-year-old cousin, Savia Robinson, also known as Lul Pab, was shot and killed. Prosecutors allege that Durk financed and directed the operation. Durk has pleaded not guilty to every charge, and those allegations still have to be proven in court. The government itself has emphasized that he is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. The federal investigation that followed eventually produced an indictment naming Durk alongside co-defendants Kayvon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Bryan Lindsay, and Asa Houston. The central charges include conspiracy to commit murder for hire resulting in death, and using and discharging a machine gun during a violent crime resulting in death. A proposed jury instruction sheet filed in August 2026 also listed conspiracy to commit stalking and stalking resulting in death among the offenses at issue. Prosecutors allege that OTF-connected credit cards were used to purchase plane tickets for people allegedly involved in the operation, flying them from Chicago to California. The government also alleges that someone connected to OTF offered valuable music opportunities to people willing to carry out the attack. Again, these are prosecution allegations, not established facts, but they form a major part of the government's theory of the case. Now, let's get into what just happened inside that courtroom. The defense has been fighting on two major fronts heading into trial, and both battles have now produced rulings that favored the prosecution. The first fight involved phone evidence, and this is where things started getting complicated. Here is the background. A cell phone connected to Durk was seized during a 2021 home burglary investigation in Georgia. Durk's defense team argued that the seizure and later search of the device raised constitutional concerns, especially because the FBI did not obtain its own federal warrant for the phone until July 8, 2026, nearly 2 years after the federal prosecution began and only about 6 weeks before trial. His lawyers argued that this delay left them with limited time to investigate the device, challenge the government's evidence, or prepare a meaningful response to whatever prosecutors found. They pushed to suppress everything obtained from the phone, including a text message prosecutors reportedly planned to use as an important trial exhibit. On August 13th, Judge Michael W. Fitzgerald heard arguments and rejected the defense's suppression motion. The judge ruled that the government's later federal warrants and the circumstances surrounding the search satisfied the applicable legal requirements. That means the specified material from the phone can be presented as evidence, assuming it also meets the normal rules for admissibility at trial. Let that sink in for a second. Digital evidence can carry serious weight in a federal courtroom because it can contain incredibly specific details, time timestamps, metadata, messages, photographs, contacts, and location information. If prosecutors can authenticate the material and connect it to their theory of the case, that phone could become one of the government's most important pieces of evidence. The defense can still challenge what the evidence means, how it was collected, and how prosecutors interpret it, but for now, they were unable to get the material thrown out completely. That is a significant setback for the defense. And then came the second major pretrial fight, this time involving music. Prosecutors targeted Durk's 2021 song "Piss Me Off" and its accompanying music video. The government filed a motion arguing that the song should be allowed into evidence because, in their view, it could shed light on Durk's mindset, his anger following King Von's death, and what prosecutors characterize as an alleged desire for retaliation. Rolling Stone reported that prosecutors described the song in their filing as showing Durk's, quote, resolve to avenge the death of his friend and protege, King Von Bennett. The government argued that the track could be presented as a call to arms, pointing to lyrics they say reference associates prepared for violence, money for weapons, and bonds, along with music video imagery showing Durk handling large amounts of cash. Prosecutors also told the judge that a cooperating witness connected to the Los Angeles shooting was present when the music video was filmed. According to the government, that witness is expected to testify about how they understood the lyrics and what was happening around the production. That could give prosecutors a way to connect the song's content directly to the story they are presenting to the jury. The defense pushed back hard. Durk's attorney argued that "Piss Me Off" was an emotional response to grief, including the death of Durk's brother, Dante, and should be understood as artistic expression rather than a criminal statement. She also tied the objection to an earlier ruling in which Judge Fitzgerald separated newly filed racketeering charges from the August trial. The defense argued that allowing the song could indirectly bring back themes connected to charges the judge had already decided to keep separate, but that argument did not carry the day. On August 13th, Judge Fitzgerald ruled that the "Piss Me Off" music video and related material could be presented at trial. That gave the government another important pretrial win. And let's be real, this ruling opens a much bigger debate that goes far beyond Durk's case. Rap lyrics have been used as evidence in criminal trials across the country for years, and the practice remains highly controversial. The argument for allowing the material is straightforward. Prosecutors say lyrics in videos can provide context about a defendant's state of mind, relationships, or intentions. But the argument against it is just as serious. Rap is a genre built around fictional stories, personas, metaphors, exaggeration, and dramatic storytelling. What an artist says in a song does not automatically describe something they actually did. Rappers regularly create characters, describe events they never experienced, and use extreme language to make a song hit harder. Taking those words literally in front of a jury that may not understand those artistic conventions can create a real risk of unfair prejudice. The judge has allowed the evidence, but the defense still has an important argument available. The song is art, not a confession. Ultimately, the jurors will decide how much weight they give it. Now let's look at the much bigger case prosecutors have assembled. Recent reporting indicates that the government has identified roughly 35 witnesses, including around 20 people considered key witnesses. A cooperating witness connected to the Los Angeles shooting is among the most significant. That person is expected to provide testimony about the alleged conspiracy, offer an interpretation of the "Piss Me Off" video, and potentially discuss conversations and events surrounding the attack. Exactly what each witness says and whether jurors believe them will only become clear once testimony begins. Former associates who cooperate with prosecutors can provide powerful first-hand accounts, but their credibility can also become a major target during cross-examination. Defense attorneys can question whether witnesses received benefits for cooperating, whether they made inconsistent statements in the past, or whether agreements with prosecutors gave them reasons to shape their stories. Those credibility battles can become intense once the jury is listening. The prosecution's evidence reportedly includes hundreds of gigabytes of digital material, along with more than 30,000 pages of investigative reports. That number is not just there to sound impressive. It shows the enormous amount of material federal investigators say they collected while building their case, including communications, records, documents, and investigative reports that prosecutors now intend to organize into their courtroom presentation. The government's case is built around connecting several different categories of evidence into one larger narrative. Prosecutors allegedly have financial records showing OTF-linked credit cards were used to purchase flights and hotel stays for people accused of traveling from Chicago to California. They also point to flight records and credit card activity that they say support their claim that Durk helped finance the alleged travel arrangements. Then there are the phone records and digital communications. Prosecutors say those materials can help establish relationships, communications, and alleged intent. Add in testimony from a cooperating witness who claims to have direct knowledge of the alleged conspiracy, and the government is building its case from several different angles. Now add the Piss Me Off music video to the mix. Prosecutors say a cooperating witness who was allegedly present during filming will personally explain the lyrics and the circumstances surrounding the production to the jury. That is a layered strategy. The government's theory is that these separate categories of evidence, when put together, can support its version of events beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead of relying on one piece of evidence, prosecutors are expected to argue that the financial records, travel history, digital communications, witness testimony, and music video all point in the same direction. Prosecutors also allege that after the shooting, people involved received specific rewards for their alleged roles. According to court filings, those alleged rewards included custom jewelry, luxury grills, and appearances in OTF music videos. The government argues that these benefits could show a system for rewarding people who carried out work on behalf of the organization. Those alleged post-shooting transactions are expected to become part of the trial record, but the defense will have the opportunity to challenge the government's interpretation of every transaction, every payment, and every connection. Here is the real twist, though. Not every pretrial ruling went the prosecution's way. In July 2026, Judge Fitzgerald handed the defense a notable victory by granting Durk's request to separate a group of newly added racketeering-related charges from the upcoming trial. Those racketeering allegations involved a separate 2022 killing in Chicago. The judge ruled that those allegations would be handled in a different trial instead of being combined with the August murder-for-hire case. That was a meaningful procedural win for the defense. It means the jury hearing the Los Angeles-related case beginning August 20th will not be asked to consider those separate Chicago racketeering allegations alongside the murder-for-hire charges. The defense managed to narrow the issues that this particular jury will have to consider. So what is the government's story likely to look like once the jury is seated? Prosecutors are expected to argue that King Von's death in November 2020 created the alleged motive. From there, they will point to communications and digital records that they say establish relationships between the people involved and provide context for what happened next. The financial records showing OTF-linked cards allegedly purchasing flights are expected to be used by prosecutors to connect the organization to the logistical planning. The travel to California is then presented as the alleged moment when the plan moved from preparation toward action. The August 19th shooting is the alleged criminal event, with Lil Pab's death as the tragic result. And prosecutors say, "Piss Me Off" can give the jury insight into Durk's state of mind during the period leading up to the attack. But this is where the defense gets its chance, and do not overlook this part. The defense can challenge what the phone evidence actually proves, whether specific messages relate directly to the charges, and whether prosecutors are giving enough context to those communications. A text message does not automatically prove a crime. Prosecutors still have to establish who sent it, who received it when it was sent, what the message meant, and how it connects to the alleged conduct. The defense can offer a different interpretation at every stage, and the music can also be presented as artistic expression rather than literal evidence of criminal intent. Durk's defense attorney has already taken that position, arguing that "Piss Me Off" was driven by grief and connected to the loss of family members, not a blueprint for violence. That argument is expected to come back in front of the jury. The defense could also point to the broader history of rap lyrics being used in court and argue that treating lyrics like sworn statements ignores how the genre actually works. A rapper can exaggerate, create a character, tell a story, or use dramatic language without describing something they actually did. Then there are the witnesses. Defense attorneys can challenge their credibility, examine any cooperation agreements they made with prosecutors, question whether they received reduced charges or other favorable treatment, and compare their earliest statements with what they eventually tell the jury. Cooperating witnesses can be powerful for the prosecution, but they can also become a major target during cross-examination. If a defense attorney finds meaningful contradictions in a witness's earlier statements, that can create serious questions about the government's version of events. The financial records can also be given alternative explanations. The defense can argue that the government's evidence contains gaps and that prosecutors still have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Durk knowingly participated in the charged conduct, rather than simply showing that people connected to OTF were involved. Durk has remained in federal custody since his October 2024 arrest after he was stopped at a Florida airport while allegedly attempting to leave the country. He has been detained without bail for nearly a year. In May 2025, prosecutors announced they would not seek the death penalty, removing the most extreme possible punishment while leaving the remaining federal charges intact. Then, in June 2025, the court denied Durk's request for pretrial release. The judge determined that the government had shown by clear and convincing evidence that no condition or combination of conditions would reasonably guarantee his appearance in court and protect the community. That is a demanding legal standard, and the court found that the government had met it. Durk has remained in federal custody while his attorneys have battled over these pretrial issues. That detention has already changed the shape of his career, his ability to release music, his finances, and his public presence in ways that even a loyal fan base cannot completely overcome. Music from incarcerated artists can still reach millions, but building, performing, collaborating, and managing a career from a federal detention facility is obviously a different situation. The charges he faces carry a statutory maximum of life imprisonment, and here is what makes that number even more serious. The federal prison system does not have parole. There is no federal parole board that simply releases someone after they serve part of a sentence. If Durk were convicted and ultimately sentenced to life, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. That possibility has been hanging over this case since his arrest in October 2024. Now let's talk about that title. When news broke on August 13th about the phone ruling and the piss me off ruling, social media exploded. Headlines and posts started claiming it was over, that Durk was cooked, that he had fainted in court, or that he had already lost. Reaction channels and commentary accounts treated those pretrial decisions almost like a final verdict. That is often how complicated legal news gets handled online. A detailed procedural hearing gets compressed into one emotional moment, with people immediately deciding who won and who lost before a single juror has even been sworn in. The audience often does not want the full legal explanation. They want the headline, the clip, or the quote that explains everything in 10 seconds. That is how viral content works. But a federal criminal trial does not work like social media. So let me be clear about what those August 13th rulings actually mean and what they do not mean. They were pre-trial evidentiary rulings. In simple terms, they determine what prosecutors may attempt to present to the jury during the trial. They are not findings of guilt, they are not convictions, and they are not a guarantee that the jury will accept the evidence the way prosecutors present it. Jurors will hear the evidence alongside cross-examination, defense arguments, and competing explanations. Judges decide questions about admissibility, while juries evaluate credibility and decide how much weight to give the evidence. Those are completely different jobs. The August 13th rulings were meaningful setbacks for the defense because they gave prosecutors additional tools for presenting their case, but they did not decide Durk's guilt or innocence. The phone evidence still has to be presented, authenticated, and explained to the jury. 12 people will ultimately evaluate that material while considering the government's burden of proving the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The Piss Me Off video also still has to be shown in court. The defense can argue that it represents grief and artistic expression from someone mourning a close friend, rather than evidence of a criminal plan. The cooperating witness still has to take the stand, tell the jury what they claim happened, and then face whatever cross-examination Durk's attorneys have prepared. That testimony will be tested in open court. And every part of the government's case still has to meet the legal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So, where do we stand? King Von was killed on November 6, 2020, outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta. The grief was real, the public mourning was documented, and according to prosecutors, something far more serious allegedly developed in the aftermath. Prosecutors allege that a bounty was placed on Quando Rondo's life, and that the alleged operation became active in August 2022. On August 18th, investigators say Durk's associates learned that Rondo was in Los Angeles. The following day, August 19th, gunfire erupted at a gas station in the Beverly Grove area near the Beverly Center. At least 18 rounds were allegedly fired. Lil Pab, Quandarondo's 24-year-old cousin, was killed while Quandarondo survived. 5 defendants connected by prosecutors to OTF were charged, and Durk was eventually arrested at a Florida airport in October 2024. Since then, the federal case has gone through months of pre-trial litigation, with the trial date being pushed back multiple times before landing on August 20th, 2026. Then came 2 very different developments. In July 2026, Judge Fitzgerald separated the newly filed racketeering charges, giving the defense a meaningful procedural victory and narrowing the issues for the August trial. But on August 13, 2026, the judge ruled that the disputed phone evidence could remain and that the Piss Me Off music video could be presented to the jury. Those decisions gave prosecutors 2 important pre-trial wins. But remember, they shape the battlefield. They do not decide who wins the case. On August 20th, 2026, jury selection begins in Los Angeles. That is where this story truly moves into its next phase. The next chapter will not be decided by social media. It will not be settled by reaction videos, hot take threads, viral courthouse clips, or dramatic YouTube thumbnails. The people deciding Durk's fate will be inside a federal courtroom, listening to opening statements, watching witnesses testify under oath, examining evidence, and hearing both sides challenge the other's version of events. Then, when the evidence is finished, the jurors will deliberate behind closed doors and decide whether the government has met its burden. That is the constitutional process, and it applies regardless of what the headlines say. The government carries the burden of proof. Prosecutors have to prove every required element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Not probably, not it looks likely. Beyond a reasonable doubt. That high standard exists to protect defendants from being convicted based on speculation, incomplete information, or evidence that does not establish guilt to the required level. Durk's attorneys have the right to challenge every part of the government's case, and based on the battles already fought during the pretrial phase, they are expected to use every legal tool available. The phone evidence can be challenged, the cooperating witnesses can be cross-examined, the meaning of the music can be debated, and the government's entire timeline will have to withstand scrutiny. So when you hear people saying the case is already finished because of one ruling, remember this. A pre-trial decision is not a verdict. What happens inside that courtroom will matter far more than the headlines surrounding it. The real story will be written through testimony, evidence, arguments, and ultimately the verdict. And when that verdict comes, we will be watching every development. Now, I want to hear from you. Which piece of evidence do you think could create the biggest challenge for the defense? The phone evidence or the Piss Me Off video? And what do you think happens once this case reaches the jury? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those cases where every development could change the conversation. If you found this breakdown useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who has been following the case. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and keep the conversation going in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we will be right here covering what happens next.